Hey everyone, it's Zack Beck. The US housing market has been out of control over the last year, thanks to limited inventory, historically low interest rates, and a supply chain shortage due to the pandemic. This is causing many individuals to question whether they should buy or they should rent during this period of time. And a recent study was put forward that actually indicates, depending upon what area of the country you live in, it is actually better to buy or to rent. So what I want to do in this video is break down in detail what it says in this study, how it could impact your decision making moving forward, and whether or not you should buy or you should rent right now. So let's take our time, dive in the details, and jump into it right now. As previously mentioned, the US housing market appears to be detached from the economic reality of this moment. That is because ever since the pandemic began, we saw prices steadily increase throughout the entire country, with people moving out of populated metropolitan areas into less populated, more suburban areas. And from that perspective, we have seen money go throughout the country where people are buying homes at record prices, getting into bidding wars, paying all cash with no contingencies, and it has been driving the prices up in all sorts of markets, including places like Boise, Idaho. So what you might have been going through during the course of this pandemic is questioning whether or not you should buy or you should rent. And that really depends because you might be in a situation where you have money to put down, you actually want to take advantage of these interest rates, but you're seeing the price of these homes going so high that you're questioning what is the best thing to do. And there was a recent study that was put forward by Florida Atlantic University, and basically what they determined is that there are certain areas of our country where it is actually better to buy, and there are certain better areas of our country where it is better to rent. And from that perspective, I believe it's important for you to understand what is the most tactical decision that you can make right now, depending upon your personal circumstance. Before we jump into the actual areas of the country where you should actually buy or rent, I think you need to know the difference between what it means if you're going to buy a home versus renting a home. I actually made a video not too long ago about that. I'll put a link in the description for you to get more detail, but generally what you want to be aware of is how much capital do you have to expend right now. Specifically when it comes to your housing costs, you generally do not want your total monthly payment to be any more than 30% of your take-home income. And from that vantage point, it is important to be aware of that, because if you begin going for too high of a price and you actually spend too much on rent or too much on a house, then you're not going to have any money left over to be able to save or invest. And that'll limit your economic growth moving forward with your limited ability to either build a nest egg or generate wealth over time. So really, it really depends upon where you are financially at this moment. If you are straddled with debt, if you're living paycheck to paycheck, buying a home might not be the right thing for you to do, irrespective of what area of the country you live in. On the other hand, if you are currently renting, but you also save a good amount of money and you already are investing, you could be missing out on the opportunity to build equity by not purchasing a home. So that might be the right decision for you. So I want to be really clear that before we look at just the specific area that you are in, it's your personal financial situation that will determine more effectively what is the right decision for you, especially if you find the right house at the right moment in the right area at the right time. And there are many things that go into buying a home. There are many things that go into renting. And one of the things that you will find is a significant advantage of renting versus buying is the limited cost relative to maintenance. You will know that if your garbage disposal breaks or your microwave goes flat or anything like that, then you're able to have it replaced by your landlord or by the organization that owns the building you live in. Whereas when you're a homeowner, all of that is your responsibility. So you really want to factor in many elements of your finances when it comes to actually owning a home versus renting. Because when you own a home, it's a long-term investment. It's something that you are going to be paying more than just your mortgage for. Think about homeowners association fees, think about regular upkeep, and oftentimes people get confused by this and they simply just look at the low monthly payment because of a low interest rate, not factoring in property taxes, not factoring in HOA fees, not factoring in maintenance, and also the inherent stress associated with that. If you don't want to spend your Saturdays at Home Depot, and if you don't want to spend all of your extra time doing maintenance, you really might want to think about the difference between home ownership versus renting from a bigger scale outside of what's going on with our economy and outside of the specific area you live in. Now on the flip side, renting can have many advantages, but also some disadvantages as well, because what you're doing when you're renting is you're not putting any money towards equity. You're basically making a monthly transaction for the services that are being provided, which is a roof over your head. And that can be a very good thing for you if you're just in a very stable financial situation and you don't really see the advantage or benefit of purchasing a home. But if you were looking to actually build equity and develop that over time, homeownership can be one of the fastest paths to wealth for most individuals. But there's also a difference between viewing a home or purchasing a home as an investment versus it actually being something you're going to do in the stock market where you're going to invest your money where it's actually liquid. Because owning a home, even though it might have a high value, doesn't necessarily mean you can pull the value out of that to actually use to purchase things in our economy. Obviously, there are home equity loans, but I would not personally recommend that. That's your own decision to do that. But generally speaking, if you're going to own a home, you're really purchasing it for the purposes of owning that property and either living in that property or renting it out. And if you're renting a home, then you might have that extra money that you're not using to spend on maintenance and spend on HOA fees or property taxes that you could invest. And herein lies where we might see a difference between what area of the country you live in and why it might be better for you to be able to rent or be able to buy, which is actually what happens in this study. So let's take a look at it right now. On that note, Florida Atlantic University has the Buy versus Rent Index, which they put a report out on a regular basis. This is basically where they take into consideration many factors and variables about different areas of the country and how the real estate market is performing and whether or not it is better for you to buy or to rent. In their most recent index put forward that there are actually certain areas of the country where it is much better to rent and then save the difference of that and invest it. So from that perspective, let's take a look at those areas. What the Buy versus Rent Index shows right now is prices are at or near peaks in Dallas, Denver, Houston, Kansas City, Seattle, and Miami. As a result, residents in those areas would be better off renting and reinvesting the money and they would have spent on ownership. So you could see that if you live in any one of those areas, you're probably better off renting right now if you're in a situation where you have the choice to be made. Obviously, if you already own a home in that area, you probably don't need to sell your home unless you're considering doing so. But once again, if you sell, you have to think where you're going to live after that. But if you're in a situation where you're already renting, it might be better to ride that out according to what the index says. What this report indicates is that there might be a market correction coming in those specific areas, and they would be impacted most dramatically relative to how much the value of their homes would be depreciating. Furthermore, what the study suggests is that if you're someone who's going to be renting, you would take the difference of what you would be spending on any sort of maintenance, any sort of HOA, property taxes, and that you would actually go and invest that money into areas like stocks or bonds, preferably into the stock market right now because bonds are not yielding very much. Personally, when I invest, I like to do it into index funds specifically because those have a long track record are generally going to yield anywhere between 7 to 10% on an annual basis when you have your dividends reinvested and you adjust it for inflation. So if you were to take the difference and actually invest it, what this report says that you would actually experience a better yield in comparison to the values potentially depreciating in the asset of a home that you might have purchased in one of those markets. Furthermore, this study looked at other metropolitan areas and determined that it's actually better to rent versus buying. And here are some of those areas. The index shows that renting and reinvesting beats buying in Atlanta, Los Angeles, Pittsburgh, Philadelphia, San Diego, Minneapolis, as well as Portland, Oregon. And what we are seeing is in those areas, it's better to rent versus buy because you're not going to get as much value for what you're going to purchase. As someone who lives in San Diego, California, I can attest to this right now. Generally, you're going to have to spend almost $1 million to get generally a very nice home here in San Diego, and that would be more on the average scale. If you're looking to be closer to the beach, if you're looking to have a more modern concept, it gets way more expensive. And if you compare that versus being able to rent in a similar location, you are going to be able to do so for a less expensive rate and still be able to experience the great weather and experience the great area. So that's just something to be aware of, and I can attest to it simply because I live here in San Diego right now. One of the most important things you could do if you're considering buying or renting a home right now is putting a down payment on the like button for the YouTube algorithm. I'm just kidding, but if you wouldn't mind tapping that like button, it would mean a lot to myself personally, as it might push this video, other people might need to hear it. So if you wouldn't mind hitting that right now, I'd really appreciate it. Now on the flip side, this report also looked at where it would be better to buy, and this is specifically looking at the difference between rental rates versus a mortgage rate in specific areas of the country. And what this report found is that buying and building equity makes more sense in Chicago, New York, Honolulu, San Francisco, Cincinnati, Boston, Cleveland, Detroit, Milwaukee, and St. Louis. In these metro areas, what we are seeing is that rental rates are actually outpacing the cost of a monthly mortgage. So therefore, you wouldn't have the excess money to be able to save and invest. So right now, it's actually better to buy in those areas and specifically in those markets if you have the opportunity to do so. Now, once again, this is a personal financial decision. You have to look at your finances right now to understand what is best for you. But ultimately, it looks like depending upon what area of the country you live in, you actually might have a better alternative to be able to buy versus to rent. And when you look at just California, what they reference in this report, the difference between Northern California and San Francisco versus Southern California, Los Angeles and San Diego, we see a disparity where it looks like rental rates in San Francisco are exceedingly high, so it's better to buy if you have the option of doing so. But then on the flip side, in Los Angeles and San Diego, it's better to rent versus to buy because we don't have that same disparity. Now, this could be because we have more of a technological sector up in Northern California, in the Silicon Valley area, and also in San Francisco, and we have a different type of economic breakdown here in Southern California. But you can see that it doesn't just relate to what state you live in, it depends upon what area of the state you live in. And this is extremely important as you're looking to make a very big financial decision that could impact the rest of your life. This report also talks about the importance of not just saving your money, but investing it. And that is because what you're going to find is that when you actually have a home and you're making monthly mortgage payments, you are building what is called equity over time. It's basically forced savings because after you pay off your home should be more valuable, hopefully 20 or 30 years down the road. And the money you've put towards your mortgage is that money you actually could have access to if you were to sell the home, or if you were to take out an equity loan, which I personally do not recommend. But once again, I'm just a guy on YouTube. I can't really give financial advice, just talking about my own personal experiences. Now, from that vantage point, what you will see is that this report says it is important that you actually, if you're going to rent, that you go and invest your money, not just let it sit on the sideline. And the reason is because what you will find, if you're just saving your money in a savings account, you're not going to see your money grow over time because of inflation. And inflation is actually going to gradually erode the value of each dollar that you save, and you'll have less money left over for you to be able to actually save and invest over time if you're just putting your money in your savings account. Now, obviously, it's important for you to have some form of savings. As far as what I'm concerned, you at least should have a 6 months set aside for maybe an emergency fund, maybe more like 3 to 6 months, where basically you have money set aside in case any emergency happens, you lose your job, a financial issue comes up, you have a health-related incident, whatever it might be, you just have a little bit of that peace of mind there. But anything beyond that, unless you're saving that money specifically to put a down payment on a home or anything to that extent, which it should be in a high interest savings account at that time, you should really be taking that money and investing it strategically, not YOLOing it all into AMC or to GameStop, not pouring it all into crypto or anything like that, but maybe putting into stable long-term returns, which are going to find something along the lines of an index fund. So that is one of the key takeaways here, is that if you are in the situation where you're considering that you want to buy and you rent, and you understood this study and you actually live in an area where it makes more sense to rent, or if you're just making the decision to rent right now, if you are taking that upon yourself, I would strongly encourage you to also consider investing if you have a different ability to do that. Now, in the same token, if you are buying a home, you should still be investing because that is not the only asset you want to have grow over time. So seriously, it's important for us to be aware of the importance of growing and building our wealth over the long haul, so that way we have financial security and we can live with dignity in the later areas of our life. With all that being said, I'd like to thank you for watching the video today. If you wouldn't mind, please tap the like button for the YouTube algorithm. Help push this video to other people who might need to hear it. Furthermore, if you have any questions, please comment down below. I'd love to interact with you, get to know you, do any research on your behalf so you can make well and wise informed decisions moving forward. Furthermore, if you wouldn't mind, please subscribe to the channel. That would mean a lot to myself personally, as I do everything I can to create positive content that makes a positive impact in your life by encouraging you and myself to lead lives of meaning and purpose, all while maintaining balance and moderation. And if you do subscribe to the channel, please tap the notification bell. That will notify you every time I post a video, which I do on a weekly basis. Once again, I'd like to thank you for watching the video today. I hope you have a wonderful day. Talk to you next time.